No one ever could touch this bull until that needy boy arrived. The sun bled orange across the flat Texas sky as the dust rolled in like slow-moving fog. This wasn't the kind of place people passed through. It was the kind of place you were born into or sent to when nowhere else would take you. The faded sign at the entrance read, Barlo Ranch, established 1947, though the paint had long peeled away, leaving just enough for you to know time hadn't been kind here. Behind the stables, behind the rusting water tower and the crooked barn, sat a reinforced steel pen the size of a swimming pool, welded from pipe so thick it could stop a truck. In it stood a beast that time had not tamed. Diablo, the locals whispered. Some said the devil lived in him. Others believed he was the devil. He was enormous, nearly 2,000 pounds of muscle and rage, with deep ridges carved into his black hide like scars from ancient wars. One of his horns was jagged, broken halfway down, twisted unnaturally like it had grown back wrong after a brutal fight. His eyes, wild, bloodshot, always scanning, never seemed to blink, like he'd learned the hard way never to let his guard down. He had thrown every rider who dared mount him. Some left with shattered ribs. One never walked again. After the last near-fatal encounter, a televised disaster that had sponsors pulling out and lawsuits rolling in, Diablo had been retired. No more bucking rings, no more crowds. Now he stood alone in the farthest corner of the ranch, pacing, waiting. For what? Nobody knew. A white social services van kicked up a tail of dust as it crawled down the dirt road leading into the ranch. The driver, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a badge clipped to her collar, didn't say much when she stepped out. She opened the sliding door. "You get one chance here, Eli," she said softly. "Don't waste it." Out stepped a boy, no older than 13, wearing jeans 2 sizes too big and a sweatshirt with frayed cuffs. He held a duffel bag in one hand and wore a plastic cast on the other. His hair was messy, uncombed, and his sneakers looked like they'd walked across 3 states. He didn't say a word, just looked at the ranch with unreadable eyes, then nodded once. Buck Barlow, the ranch owner, stood by the fence. Late 50s, silver in his beard, eyes like rusted steel. He'd fought in 2 wars and buried both his parents on this land. He wasn't one for handshakes or small talk. "This the kid?" he asked. The caseworker nodded. "He got a name?" "Eli." Buck looked the boy over. "You know how to work?" Eli shrugged. "If I don't, I'll learn." Buck snorted. "We'll see." And with that, the van rolled away, leaving nothing but its dust and a silence that settled hard over the boy's shoulders. The bunkhouse was little more than a shack with creaking floorboards and 2 narrow beds. Eli shared it with a ranch hand named Rudy, a man who smelled of chewing tobacco and loneliness. First night, Rudy tried to make small talk. "Where you from, kid?" Eli shrugged. "Parents?" Another shrug. Rudy spat into a cup. "Suit yourself." But while the other ranch hands smoked or drank coffee in the mornings, Eli did something strange. On his first dawn, long before the rooster crowed, he slipped on his shoes, slung his duffel over his shoulder, and wandered through the ranch alone. Past the horse stables, the windmill, the row of tractors rusting under the Texas sun, and then past the warning signs. Danger. Do not approach the pen. Highly aggressive animal. Authorized personnel only. The metal gate to Diablo's pen was cracked open slightly, a loose hinge, long ignored. Eli squeezed through and stepped into the arena of death, barefoot now, his sneakers dangling from his hand. He walked slowly, calmly. Dust lifted around his ankles as he crossed the pen, every step a silent dare to fate. Diablo noticed immediately. His massive head turned, his hooves shifted. A snort burst from his flared nostrils. The beast pawed at the dirt. But Eli didn't run. He kept walking until he was close enough to see his own reflection in Diablo's dark eyes. Then he stopped, dropped his bag, and sat cross-legged in the dirt like he was in the middle of a quiet classroom. He didn't move, didn't flinch. For a long, breathless moment, neither did Diablo. Then, something no one could explain happened. The bull lowered his head ever so slightly. Not submission, not surrender, recognition. From the bunkhouse window, Rudy had seen it all. "Buck," he muttered, stumbling outside with a cigarette halfway lit. You ain't gonna believe this." "What?" Buck grumbled, dragging his boots across the porch. "The kid, he's in the pen." Buck's coffee spilled across the floor before the mug hit it. By the time Buck arrived, Diablo was still. Eli was still. The wind was still. "Jesus Christ," Buck whispered. "He should be dead." He didn't yell. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching through the slats of the fence like he was looking at a ghost. Finally, Eli stood, grabbed his bag, and turned to walk back toward the gate. As he passed Diablo, the bull snorted again, not in warning, in what could almost be mistaken for relief. Eli paused, looked back. "He's not evil," he said quietly. Buck stepped forward. "You say something?" Eli nodded. "He's just tired of being hurt." Later that night, Buck sat on his porch alone, bottle of whiskey in one hand, Diablo's old rodeo poster in the other. The words, "undefeated," 17 straight buck-offs were faded, but visible. So was the bloodstain from the night Diablo nearly killed a man. Inside the bunkhouse, Eli curled up on his cot. He hadn't eaten dinner. He hadn't spoken another word since the pen. But before he fell asleep, he pulled something from his duffel, a small, creased photo. It showed a boy, maybe 5, sitting on a man's shoulders, both smiling wide at a rodeo. Eli stared at it for a long time, then tucked it under his pillow and closed his eyes. Outside, Diablo let out a low, guttural sound, not a threat, not a warning, a call. And Eli, half asleep, smiled for the first time in months. Moral reflection, bonus. Sometimes the broken recognize each other across silence. It isn't words that build trust, it's wounds. And when the world gives up on you, the only thing more powerful than fear is being seen. At first they didn't believe it. Rudy told them what he'd seen. The boy walking into Diablo's pen like it was a church, sitting down in the dirt as calm as Sunday morning. The monster just watching. But Rudy liked to tell stories, and after a few beers even he wasn't sure what was true anymore. But by the third day, no one could ignore it. Eli wasn't just near Diablo. He was with him. Mornings before breakfast, while most of the hands were still rubbing sleep from their eyes, the boy slipped out with 2 apples tucked under his arm. He'd crouch outside the pen and roll them one by one through the gate. Diablo never lunged, never bellowed. He just took the apples gently in his teeth, chewed slowly, and kept his eyes on the boy like he was waiting for something more. "Kid's not right," muttered Hank, one of the senior ranch hands, a man with calloused fingers and a tattoo of a rattlesnake curling up his forearm. "Talks to that bull like it's his damn grandma." "Or maybe he's cursed," said Tom, another. "Ain't natural, that kind of calm. Maybe the devil's got both their souls already." They whispered when the boy passed, like he couldn't hear them. But Eli did. He always did. His shoulders would tense, just slightly, before he kept walking. Buck watched it all from the porch with narrowed eyes and a gnawing in his gut that hadn't eased in days. On the 4th morning, he waited by the fence. Eli appeared just after dawn, as always, barefoot now, with a small brown paper bag in one hand. Buck stepped forward. "You don't listen real well, do you?" Eli froze, then looked up, expression unreadable. "That animal," Buck growled, "has more blood on him than you got skin. I watched him flip a man so high he hit the lights above the ring before crashing down headfirst. You think apples are going to change what he is?" Eli didn't blink. Maybe he's just never had anyone ask why. "Why what?" "Why he's angry." Buck stared, the words catching him off guard. For a moment, something flickered across his face. A memory, maybe, buried deep and sour. But he buried it fast. "You go back to that pen and the next time we see you might be to dig your grave," Buck said finally. He turned and walked off, not waiting for an answer. But later that night, after the lights had gone out and the crickets started singing their steady song, Eli stood outside Buck's cabin, quiet as a shadow. The porch creaked under his bare feet. Buck opened the door, belt undone, shirt off, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You lost?" Eli shook his head. "What happens to Diablo when nobody wants him anymore?" Buck's eyes hardened. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at the boy, at the cast on his arm, the hollow beneath his eyes, the stillness that didn't belong to a kid so young. "Go back to bed, Eli." "But now." The door slammed shut. Eli stood there for a long while, staring at the wood, as if hoping it might open again. It didn't. In the barn the next day, the air felt thicker. The radio buzzed with half-static country music, and the ranch hands worked slow, glancing toward Diablo's pen every few minutes, as if expecting to hear screams or bones breaking. Instead, they saw the boy, sitting cross-legged like always, but this time talking, not out loud but softly, in little hums and whispers. He leaned forward, chin resting on his hands, and Diablo stood only feet away. Hank shook his head. "Swear to God, if that boy climbs on his back, I'm quitting." Rudy spat into the dirt. "I think that bull knows something we don't." Tom scoffed. "What? That the boy's cracked in the head?" "Maybe," Rudy murmured. "Or maybe they're both just tired of being hated." That night, Buck sat alone in the office, the overhead bulb flickering weakly. The county paperwork lay open on his desk, one sheet stamped in red at the top. Order for termination. Livestock, dangerous, unfit. In simple terms, Diablo had been marked for destruction. 1 week from now, the county vet would arrive. The needle would be long, the death fast. Painless, they said. Merciful, even. Buck stared at the line where he was supposed to sign. He didn't. That same evening, Eli sat on his bunk, fidgeting with the cast on his arm. Rudy, lying on the opposite bed, glanced over. "Break it in a fight?" Rudy asked. Eli shook his head. Rudy waited, then muttered, "Didn't think so." A long pause. Then Eli said, "Foster dad. Got drunk. Said I wasn't grateful enough." Rudy sat up, blinking. "Threw me into a bookshelf," Eli said plainly. "Broke the bone. First time I ever called the cops." Silence stretched thin in the room. Rudy looked away. "People don't like it when you fight back." Eli nodded. "That's why I get moved so much." Neither of them said anything else. But Rudy didn't lie down again. He just sat there, staring at the floor, lost in thoughts he hadn't visited in years. The following morning, as dawn painted the horizon in bruised gold and purple, Eli stood at the gate again. This time, he didn't bring apples. He brought his photo. He unfolded it carefully, fingers brushing the crease. Diablo approached slowly, eyes locked onto the small paper rectangle. "It's me and my dad," Eli said softly. "He used to ride, not bulls, but horses, real good at it." The bull snorted. "He died 3 years ago. Car crash." A pause. Diablo's breath warmed the photo in Eli's hand. "They said it wasn't my fault, but if I hadn't asked him to pick me up early—" Eli stopped. The words stuck in his throat. Diablo stepped closer, close enough for Eli to feel the heat radiating from his skin. The boy reached out, and for the first time his hand touched the beast's scarred muzzle. Buck saw it from the porch, saw the connection, the trust, the weight of two broken things leaning into each other without falling apart. He lit a cigarette, hands shaking, then walked to the barn and pulled out the old VHS tape from a dusty drawer, the one labeled Rodeo Finals 2009, Diablo versus Mace Reeves. He slid it into the player. The grainy footage flickered. He watched as Mace, the fourth rider, the one nearly killed, got thrown like a rag doll. Buck winced at the sound of bones breaking, crowd screaming. He paused the tape on Diablo's eyes. They weren't wild then. They were panicked, terrified. "Damn it," Buck muttered. "You were just scared, weren't you?" The next few days passed slowly, tension coiled tight across the ranch. The county vet was still scheduled, the paperwork unsigned, but the mood had changed. Hank kept his distance. Tom avoided eye contact with Eli. Rudy brought the boy extra bacon at breakfast. And Buck watched, waited, until the 5th night, when something happened that none of them expected. Eli disappeared, his bunk untouched, his duffel missing, the photo gone, and the gate to Diablo's pen, wide open. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when the rumble of tires stirred the gravel at the front gate. A long black county truck rolled in slow, the silver badge on the side catching what little light crept through the trees. At the wheel sat Sheriff Maddox, boots polished, jaw stiff, and eyes dull from too many mornings like this one. In the passenger seat was the county vet, Dr. Leighton, a quiet man with a clipboard and an empty stare. Between them, packed carefully in a steel case, was the needle. They called it humane. Buck met them at the porch steps, coffee in hand, expression carved from stone. "You didn't have to come this early," Buck said. Maddox didn't get out right away. He sat, staring out at the horizon like it might offer him a better excuse. "Procedure," he finally muttered, patting the tranquilizer gun that rested on the seat beside him. "Easier before breakfast. Less fuss." Buck nodded once. He didn't look at the case. Behind him, the ranch slowly came to life. Low murmurs from the bunkhouse, boots hitting dirt, the occasional clink of metal in reins. But no one laughed. No one sang. Today felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. Eli wasn't at breakfast. Rudy noticed first, glanced at the empty chair, then out the window. "He's with the bull," he said quietly. Buck set his coffee down, hard. The pen was at the edge of the property. A battered fence that had long since stopped pretending to be secure. Diablo stood in the middle, kicking dust, snorting hard. He wasn't pacing. He was thrashing. Something in him knew. Eli stood on the other side of the bars, hands clenched into fists at his side, his whole body tense like a coiled spring. His eyes never left the bull. When Maddox and Dr. Leighton approached, the boy's shoulders drew up. "Don't," Eli said. Maddox didn't stop walking. "Kid, step away." "He's not dangerous." The sheriff motioned to the vet, who pulled open the steel case and lifted the dart. Thick as a finger, the color of cold metal, the kind that carried silence in its tip. "Eli!" Buck's voice cut across the yard. "Back up! Now!" But Eli didn't move. He stepped between the bars, fast, before anyone could grab him, and ran into the pen. The whole ranch shouted. Diablo froze, not a step, not a twitch, just watched as the boy came to him, arms wide like wings like a shield. Eli threw himself against the bull's face, forehead pressed to the scarred hide, voice low but shaking. "No," he whispered. "Please, not him." The ranch hands froze. Maddox raised the tranquilizer halfway, hesitated. "Kid, he'll kill you," he warned. "He won't." Eli's voice cracked as he spoke louder now, turning just enough for them to hear. "He saved me." No one breathed. I was gonna end it," Eli said. "Back in the last house, I had a plan. Had the note. I was gonna go into the garage that night and—" His voice broke again. "Then social services came early, dumped me here. Like trash." He turned back to Diablo, his small hand resting between the bull's eyes. "I saw him that first morning. Everyone said he was violent, that he couldn't be fixed. But he was just tired, like me." The silence felt heavy, like it might crush the dirt itself. "I didn't think I deserved to live," Eli said, tears sliding down his cheeks. "But he didn't give up, not once, even when the world called him a monster." Buck lowered his head, eyes clouded. Even Maddox didn't move. Dr. Leighton glanced at his watch, then at the boy. He didn't reach for the dart again. And then, crack, a loud snap echoed across the yard. Diablo moved, but not toward the boy. He spun on his back hooves, muscles rippling, and charged the pen gate. Wood exploded, nails screaming as the beam split. Dust flew. Eli was behind him, untouched. "No!" Buck shouted, running forward. "He's not attacking!" Maddox stumbled back, gun raised instinctively, but too late. Diablo was through the gate, not wild-eyed, not crazed, but focused. He stopped 6 feet from the sheriff's truck. He didn't lunge. He stood, between Eli and the dart. It was Rudy who spoke first, breathless. "He's protecting him." The words landed like thunder. Maddox lowered the tranquilizer gun slowly, confused. Buck stepped forward, holding a hand out. "Back away," he said to the others. "Everyone, give him space." One by one, the ranch hands obeyed, even Maddox, even Leighton. Only Eli moved forward, walked past the shattered gate, past the astonished men, until he stood beside Diablo again. He reached up, rested his hand against the bull's neck. The animal exhaled low and deep. The threat was gone, but the message remained. Later, after the dust settled and the sun had finally risen over the hills, Buck sat in the office again, staring at the unsigned form. He took a pen and ripped it in half. That evening, Diablo stood calmly in a new corral, one built stronger, wider, and closer to the ranch house. Rudy leaned on the fence beside Eli, chewing a toothpick. "Could have died," Rudy muttered. Eli nodded. "I know. You scared the hell out of us." Eli didn't respond. Rudy looked at him, then at the bull, who was now chewing on a salt lick like nothing had happened. "You ever gonna ride him?" Eli shook his head. "Number he's done fighting." Rudy spat the toothpick. "And you?" Eli stared at the horizon, hands in his pockets. The wind picked up, brushing the hair from his face. "I think I'm just getting started." Moral reflection. Bonus. When someone sees value in what the world has thrown away, it changes both of them. But that kind of bond comes with danger, not from the beast, but from those who fear what they can't control. Sometimes, the greatest threat isn't the wild. It's the silence we let fester around it. The midday sun shone hard, washing the ranch in stark clarity. Dust motes danced above pens and pathways, settling steadily as if time itself paused. Everyone's eyes fixed on Diablo, poised like a silent guardian between Eli and the open space toward the newborn calves. Buck's chest tightened. He trusted Diablo now, but not enough to let his guard down. A low growl rumbled from the bull's throat. He stood unnaturally still, ears swiveling toward a dark corner of the lower pen. Eli followed his lead, and suddenly, blurred by the fence, a lithe coyote slunk between posts, its gaze locked on a newborn calf, vulnerable and tremulous. It crept closer, stealthy as a shadow. Buck's heart kicked. "Coyote!" Rudy snatched a shovel. Hank raised a rope. The ranch hands surged forward, adrenaline and fear squeezing tight in their hearts. But Diablo didn't charge them. He charged the coyote. It happened without warning. The bull rammed the fence, broken wood splintering, teeth bare, hooves pounding the dirt. The coyote bolted, yapping in terror, fleeing back into the scrub. Diablo stood firm, barrier between predator and prey, unmistakable protector. The silence that followed felt heavy as mortar. The sheriff, still holstered but knuckles white, lowered his gun. "Damn," he mouthed. Even in that moment of relief, no one celebrated. Buck's gaze snapped from Diablo to Eli. The boy's face was drenched in sweat, chest rising and falling like he'd run miles. But he was calm, as if every second had been rehearsed, every beat understood. Buck's stare was unreadable. Then, from the radio crackled a voice so soft it almost didn't come through. "Hey, boss," came a shaky whisper. "You're not going to believe this, but I found something buried in the hay barn. Looks like human bones." Dead silence. It stretched. Rudy froze mid-step, shovel in hand. Hank's rope dropped as his mouth opened. The coyote had disappeared, fear echoing across empty pens. Suddenly all eyes fell on the barn, a looming, weather-beaten structure at the back of the ranch, doors swinging in the afternoon breeze. Buck swallowed hard. He didn't look at Eli. He didn't speak. He inhaled, as if bracing for a punch. "Who is it, Jim?" He spoke into the radio, voice steady but eyes haunted. "Just come see." The voice trembled. Buck dropped the handset. His gaze turned to Eli. For the first time, the silence between them felt loaded. Then Eli stepped forward, resolute. "I know who," he whispered. Every set of eyes followed him. Even Diablo, grazing nearby, turned to watch. Buck's eyes flickered. "You do?" Eli nodded slowly. "But you're not going to like it." Buck walked away from his men, eyes locked on the boy. "Show me," he said low. They moved toward the barn, a grim procession. The barn door swung open fully, revealing ancient bundles of hay drifting in shafts of sun and dust. Their footsteps sounded thunderous in the hush. Then Rudy stepped forward. At his boot lay bits of cloth, torn and stained. He knelt, picked them up slowly. Underneath, protruding from loose straw, lay something pale and curved. A bone. Human. Buck swallowed. He stared at the rusted rake handle leaning by the wall, splintered into two. Then saw something else. Small footprints in dusty straw. Barefoot prints, not animal. He looked at Eli. The boy's face was steady, quiet. He reached in, picked up a bracelet tangled around a vertebra. Dirty, nearly decomposed, but still a block of metal with letters worn almost illegible. Buck caught his breath. Eli, is that? The boy finished the words. Dad's. Tears welled in Buck's eyes. The ranch hands moved as a unit, closing in on Eli with confusion and suspicion. The sun shifted. In the hush, Rubio nearly whispered, Your dad's bones? Eli nodded once. He died here. The world trembled. Everything unspooled. Buck felt his heart pulse against his ribs. Why didn't you say so? Buck whispered. Eli's gaze dropped. Because I wasn't sure. I didn't want anyone to see me as the boy who buried his dad. Buck knelt beside him, crushed. But how? The boy wiped his eyes. He came here looking for me. He never found me. There was a storm 3 years ago, lightning and fire. He chased the ranch hands away, saying they had the wrong boy. He looked for me in the barns. Then no one saw him again. Buck swallowed. The wind rattled the barn walls. Diablo snorted, joined the circle, pressing close to Eli as if offering comfort. Eli slid to his knees and leaned back against Diablo's flank. He told me once, Find me, son. I didn't know it was a command. I thought he meant someday, but I pulled the photo from my bag. I remembered the picture, me on his shoulders in this barn. He pressed his palm into the wood floor. Rudy leaned forward, voice shaking. You led us here? Eli nodded. I didn't want him to be forgotten. Buck stared, tears trailing down his cheeks. He reached out, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. We'll send him somewhere proper, with dignity. Eli exhaled, sagging with relief. Thank you. The tension cracked, leaving a raw, stunned calm. Buck looked into the boy's eyes, then at Diablo, who lowered his head and licked Eli's hair. Their bond was unbreakable. The ranch hand stared. Buck straightened. Tomorrow's a burial, not just for a man, but for the past, for all of us who didn't see. The sheriff nodded. County will send someone. Hank raised his head. I'll do it. Eli embraced Diablo's neck. The bull stood quiet, still. Buck stepped back into the sun. Overhead, the circling buzzards finally flew away. Bonus moral reflection. Our greatest journeys often end where we least expect. The answers we need might lie buried beneath the past's dust. But sometimes, salvation is found in seeing the pain behind the silence and honoring the bones we once tried to forget.